welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Johnny DC.
And I'm his twin brother, Marvelous Joe.
And as a tie into our last episode, which was a duel between Kilowog and Beta Ray Bill, this episode we are doing a review of the 2011 animated DC film Green Lantern Emerald Knights.
Yeah, it's one that I've never seen before. It came out around the same time as the live-action Green Lantern film starring Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
It did seem like there was supposed to be a sequel to this animated film, but of course the poor reception to the live-action film kind of soured the studio on the character. So it's unfortunate because I actually really did like this movie.
I really liked this. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I also saw it for the first time this past week, and we'll get into our thoughts on it later on in this episode. Before that, we're going to break down the comic book movie news from the past week, including 2 trailers. One for Black Widow and a new Suicide Squad trailer that's not Red Band. They called it the Rebellion trailer. We're also going to talk about how Venom has been pushed back once again. Is that film ever coming out?
I feel like we just did this story.
Exactly. And we're going to wrap up the news by talking about how New Gods and The Trench have been canceled at Warner Brothers.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
Real quick, if you guys have been listening to us for a while and you want to support the show, there are a number of ways you can do that. First off, you can follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and share it with your Marvel and DC loving friends and family. If you could follow or share us on Instagram in particular, that would be a huge help. We're actually looking to get to 1,000 followers there, at which point we have a big surprise for you guys.
Yeah. You could also help us out by rating us or reviewing us on your platform of choice, including Apple Podcasts or podchaser.com.
And finally, you can join us on Patreon, where you can chat with us on Discord, listen to a blooper reel of the show every month, as well as more awesome perks, including the ability to become an executive producer of this show.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who lends us their support. We truly appreciate everyone who has done that and everyone who will do that. Just a heads up, be sure to go listen to the Blast from Our Past podcast with hosts Adam Speas and John Speas. They're great friends of the show. If you guys have listened to this show for a while, you've probably heard us mention them before. I did a guest spot with them where the three of us counted down our top 10 favorite Marvel comic book storylines from all time. It was a lot of fun recording with those guys, and if you don't already follow the Blast from Our Past podcast, definitely do that because they have a great show.
Yeah, they also have a top 10 DC stories episode. I was not a part of that. My feelings weren't hurt, not that much. So it's fine.
But yeah, check them out. And with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize.
A No Prize is an award Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post on social media that Jonathan draws for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question tied into the news that Helen Mirren was cast as an original character in the film Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So we asked, who is your favorite original character to appear in a Marvel or DC film that did not previously appear in the comics? And the keyword there was film, because that was the question. And we decided to give honorable mentions and the win to people who chose characters from films.
Right. Original characters that were introduced in television shows could be an entirely different question that we'll probably ask later down the line at some point.
So before we announce the winner of this week's No Prize, we want to go through a few honorable mentions, including this answer from John Speas.
Hey guys, John from Blast from Our Past here. I'm going to go with the character of Jared Nomak from Blade 2. Blade 2 is my favorite of the trilogy, and I really think that the characters that they created for that particular one were just really cool and interesting, and in my opinion, the most interesting out of any of the Blade movie villains.
Yeah, I loved the Reapers from Blade 2.
They were crazy disgusting.
Yeah, the way their jaws would open up and they'd have those like weird mutant fangs.
Ugh.
Yeah. Nomak was a villain that was never from the comics. He was introduced in that movie, and he seemed particularly well fleshed out for an original character.
Yeah.
He had a lot of depth, and the actor who played him gave a fantastic performance. So really great answer. And if you guys haven't listened to our review of Blade 2, which we did a few years ago, definitely check that out.
Also, check out the Blast from Our Past podcast. John Speas is a co-host. Make sure you listen to them, and also give them crap for not having me on the show. Our next honorable mention goes to Michael Haggerty, who said,
Hello guys, Michael Haggerty here. My answer for this question would have to be Bob the Goon from the Batman 1989 film. He was a one-hit wonder, but he is forever in our hearts. Bob the Goon deserved better.
Now, what do you know about this Bob character? He was particularly memorable in the 89 Batman movie as the Joker's right-hand man.
Right.
But I did hear a rumor that Bob was like the best friend of Jack Nicholson or something that he just brought onto the movie.
Yeah, he was played by Tracy Walter. He's an actor. He's been in a few other projects, but he was really good friends with Jack Nicholson, and that's how he got the role.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a memorable performance, and I can't put my finger on why. Maybe it was because he was done such an injustice when the Joker shot him. It was just so shocking.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He was done dirty, especially considering he was his number one guy throughout the whole movie.
Exactly.
And then, just so callous the way the Joker shot him.
Joker's just crazy like that.
Our final honorable mention goes to Travis Bailey, who said,
Travis Bailey, longtime listener, love the show. All right, so I'm going to go with 89 Punisher's Lady Tanaka, because, it's Lady Tanaka. You don't take that one, I'm going to go with Whistler from 1998's Blade. And if y'all acting funny, y'all don't take that one, then I'm going to go with Louise from Ant-Man. But yeah, love the show. Keep it up.
Now, Travis went for the shotgun approach with his answers here, and that was a risky move, but it played off for him well because all three of those were great answers in their own right. But Lady Tanaka was the villain of the Punisher 89 movie. She was pretty fascinating. I liked her character. Whistler was also a really great original character introduced by David Goyer, who wrote the script for Blade.
And he was popular, too. Like, so popular, they couldn't get rid of him in the Blade franchise. He had to keep coming back even though he died in the films.
Yeah, and they put him in the comics, too, for a bit. And then Luis, of course, everybody loves Luis. He gives the best exposition out of any character in the entire MCU.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what phase Marvel is in right now, but if they ever want to do, like, recaps of their phases for people coming on board for the first time, just have Luis explain everything to them.
Yeah, the Marvel Legends show that's on Disney Plus should just be of Luis.
Exactly!
Telling the stories. That would be amazing.
Luis's Legends.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Now, before we get into the No Prize winner, we want to thank everybody who reached out to us and took the time to leave us a voicemail on our website, dynamicduel.com, including Marquis High, Ken Johnson, John Starosky, Zach Hepburn, and Miggy Madangian. You guys all gave great answers, some of you very hilarious answers. But the winner of this week's No Prize is
Tim Brown, a longtime listener, and he said,
Tim Brown here. And my favorite character to appear in the films that previously was not in any comic is Phil Coulson. He was a fun character. They had a couple one-shots at least with him in it that I thought were pretty cool. And so he goes down as my choice of a character that was not previously in a comic, but to first appear in a movie. Thanks.
And of course, the ultimate original film character is Phil Coulson. Great answer. Phil was so beloved as the face of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first Iron Man movie that they brought him back for Iron Man 2 and the Avengers, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show after the Avengers movie. The guy just took his secondary original character status and just pushed it as far as it could possibly go.
Yeah, it was a role that spanned longer than a decade.
Yeah, that's insane when you think about it. So great answer, Tim Brown. Congratulations, you win this week's No Prize. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. And now that that's done,
on to the news.
All right, so in last week's episode, we discussed that the Black Widow film will be coming out on July 9th, 2021, simultaneously in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access. The film first got pushed back at the last moment, and it had already pretty much run through its entire marketing campaign.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen anything from this film since then, and it was a pretty big shock to get a trailer this past week, considering that we still have like 3 months to go before this movie comes out. I was a little hesitant to watch this because I'm already sold on the movie from the last trailers. They showed a lot of amazing clips in these previews, and I didn't want to see more of the movie spoiled.
Right.
Luckily, this trailer, called The New Trailer, managed to circumvent a lot of that spoiler territory by showing us a lot of clips from the Avengers movies.
Yeah, they sort of pulled like an Avengers Endgame type marketing approach with this.
Yeah.
Just really nostalgia focused. Like they want to remind you everything that's happened with the character so far.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of Marvel fans, it works.
I think it totally does. It did a good job of reminding us why we care about this character so much. How we've grown with this character through the years since 2010, and how important she's been to a lot of these stories. Because out of sight, out of mind, you go a year without being reminded of Black Widow and you kind of forget, what's going on there.
Yeah, exactly.
The trailer is pretty basic. It hits a lot of the same beats as the previous trailers, but we were fortunate enough to get a few new shots of Natasha's and Yelena's past.
Yeah, Marvel is really fortunate in that they could sell a film to its fans while still being enigmatic, because we've had how many trailers for this, and I still really don't have a good idea of what the central conflict is or anything.
Yeah, it's a big mystery. We know that the story involves the Russian Red Room and Taskmaster and Natasha and Yelena's former surrogate family. It really appears from this trailer that they were embedded as a sleeper spy unit, so they were acting as a family.
Right. Yeah, I got that same impression.
But Yelena and Natasha were just girls at that time. And Yelena gives a kind of touching line in this preview where she's like, it was real to me. Like, that was her family.
They did choose a pretty spot-on lookalike actress for young Natasha.
Yeah. So it looks like the film will be delving heavily into the themes of family and the old family compared to Natasha's new family with the Avengers and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, she does call the Avengers her family in this trailer.
We didn't see too much more of Taskmaster, but we did get this really cool action shot where he freaking ricochets an explosive arrow underneath Natasha's escape vehicle. That was badass. That was one of the coolest trick shots that we've seen out of all the Marvel movies, and I really feel bad for Hawkeye because he should be doing those type of trick shots like nonstop. So the fact that they gave probably the most impressive trick shot to Taskmaster is a little disappointing.
I'm sure Hawkeye will have plenty of time to shine in his own television series.
He better. That's all I'm saying.
Or else what?
Square up.
What?
I don't know. Square up. Oh my God, we're dumb. But anyway, it was really interesting how that ricochet shot exploded Black Widow's car so high that she ended up in the sky, like skydiving.
That was a great cut, actually.
It was an interesting transition.
It did kind of have a bit of a spoiler in that you saw Black Widow snatch a parachute. So now we know how she survives that whole fall.
Perhaps, I mean, she does lose it at some point, so I think that the whole mid-air struggle will be between her and Taskmaster not only trying to kill each other, but also trying to get that parachute. I think it's going to be an amazing action scene.
It should be. It's been teased in every single trailer.
Yeah. At the end of this preview, we got this cool new Black Widow title card with this like Russian choir singing the Avengers theme in the background. That was pretty cool. They did play the Avengers theme heavily throughout this trailer, but I really like the Black Widow theme.
Yeah, where it sounds like a guitar slide almost.
Yes. Yeah, I want to hear more of that. But again, this trailer's job was to remind you, hey, remember the Avengers? She was a part of them. Check this movie out.
Yeah.
And we will.
Yeah, I mean, we'll all see Black Widow, but I think the movie we're really looking forward to is the Suicide Squad, because this new trailer, so good. Totally sold me.
Why do we need another new trailer is what I'm wondering. Didn't we just get a trailer? Why this one? Why is it so different? This is like 2 trailers at once. They're going to shoot all their shots before the movie comes out.
Well, this was the theatrical trailer. This was the one that came before Godzilla vs. Kong in theaters, because they can't show the Red Band trailer before that. It's not rated R.
Yeah, but they could do an edited version of the Red Band trailer.
That trailer wasn't as well received as it was on this podcast.
Oh, really?
So I'm not surprised they went with an alternate version. As much as I liked that last trailer because of all like the witty James Gunn dialogue, this trailer, which they're calling the Rebellion trailer, had a lot more action. And I really think that's going to help sell the film. It starts off with Blackguard and Javelin in some kind of plane, and we see Harley Quinn with them, which is actually the first time we see Harley Quinn with these 2 characters. Because typically, when you see Blackguard and Javelin, they're with Savant and Captain Boomerang, TDK, and stuff like that. They're not with Peacemaker or Ratcatcher or Polka Dot Man or that small team.
So it's almost like there are 2 teams.
Yeah. I feel like the first team dies pretty early on. That's just a guess. And the other team has to go in to clean up their mess or rescue them or something like that. All in all, that's what you want, though, because this is the Suicide Squad and these characters are supposed to be disposable. There's a voiceover early on in the trailer. I'm not sure who it's coming from. I think it might be the Thinker, but he's essentially calling out the Suicide Squad team members as being a joke, a punchline. You know, they're just being used by Amanda Waller. And he says all it would take is one, act of rebellion to regain their honor, essentially.
I wonder if this is like a telepathic message that he's delivering to one specific team member.
It may well be.
Like he's trying to sow discord among the group.
Yeah, he's trying to start a rebellion, perhaps. The voiceover happens during a really cool shot where they're slow-mo walking in the rain. And that was a nice juxtaposition with what we see next, which is them cleaning tables and stuff like that.
What were those little creatures that were swimming in the aquarium that King Shark is looking at?
I was wondering the same thing. Are they aliens? Is this what Starro comes from? Does this South American dictator grow aliens in his aquarium or something like that? I have no idea. They look really cool though. And I think that angle sort of makes King Shark a really viable asset for the team, considering that these are underwater creatures. The vibe of this trailer is a little bit like Quentin Tarantino, which it should be, which is awesome. I think in part because it has like a Western musical track to it this time. And again, there's just a ton of action. It looks great. It seems like we get a lot more character shots, from Polka Dot Man throwing his polka dots to Ratcatcher using that like little scepter thing she has to summon rats.
We get to see Captain Boomerang throw a boomerang.
Right? Right?
Finally.
It looks real shiny and it looks like it's going to go into someone's head. We didn't get any of that in the first film. James Gunn knows how to use these characters better, and it's evident just from these trailers. There's a joke in this trailer from John Cena's Peacemaker about how he's willing to kill any man, woman, and child for peace. I did like it more than the whole eating dicks on a beach joke that they had from the last one.
Yeah, this one explained the character a little bit more.
Exactly. And I love seeing TDK, who is pretty evidently the detachable kid by this point. I loved seeing his display of powers and Harley Quinn's reaction to it. It was just like, what the f-? And then they cut her.
I don't get what I'm looking at when I see his powers. He can detach his limbs, but only barely so, and he still has control over them. So what does that do? Does that give him like just extra reach while he punches things, or what?
Well, I was under the impression that they could go a lot farther. Like he could just control his arms sailing through the air kind of thing.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
Interesting.
The trailer ends with Bloodsport, firing off some rounds from like this really high-tech looking spinning gun. And that was unique. Like I don't see Deadshot doing that. Although I hope he misses. And Harley goes, geez, you really aren't a Deadshot, or something like that.
Yeah, I really do like his gun. It seems very futuristic, very high-tech, some kind of weird weapons technology.
But yeah, again, anything they could do to separate him from the Deadshot character, the better, I think.
Yeah.
All in all, this trailer has me much more pumped for the film than the previous one. I think they honestly should have just released this one.
Because of the better character moments?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I think I still kind of preferred the Red Band trailer, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, because I think it was actually truer in tone to what we're actually going to get.
That may be true. And I would still enjoy that. And that brings us to our question of the week.
We want to know, which trailer from the Suicide Squad film did you prefer? Red Band or Rebellion trailer? And why?
Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message can be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media.
Be sure to answer before April 12th. In other Marvel news, we learned that Venom has been pushed back yet again, this time by only 1 week, and I have no idea why, but it's been moved from September 17th to September 24th.
This thing's getting more release dates than Wonder Woman 1984.
I know, right? It's strange, because the only competition it had on the previous day was the Boss Baby sequel, which I think was prime counter-programming to that.
Yeah, I imagine very little demographic overlap between those two films.
Right, exactly. And now, with its new release date, Dune just comes out a week later on September 31st.
Really? That was a horrible decision. Why did they push this film?
I don't know, because a week after that, the new James Bond movie comes out after that. So those two films are just going to cannibalize Venom's audience. I feel like it's a horrible decision. I can't figure out why they did it. Maybe it was to put some distance between it and the Shang-Chi movie that Marvel's putting out just a few weeks prior.
That could be it. Maybe Marvel asked them to do it.
I mean, it's possible. Who knows?
I think studios really need to just put the films out, If Godzilla vs. Kong's success recently has been any indicator, I think a lot of people are eager for new content.
Yeah, they just want to see movies,
I guess that's hard because Sony doesn't have its own platform to release these films on.
Right. So they have to do it in theaters, so they have to be a little bit more careful. I don't think Sony's going to last much longer as a studio.
Really? Whoa,
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
Well, because they don't have their own streaming service.
Sony does kind of have its own streaming service in the PlayStation Network. What if this film became like a PlayStation exclusive, along with theaters? Would that make you buy a PlayStation?
No, I would not buy a PlayStation just to see this movie. I mean, Sony does own Blu-ray, so if they really wanted to make a lot of money, they would just make all their new releases direct to video.
Wait, Sony owns Blu-ray?
Yes.
What? That's huge! I did not know that.
Releasing the movie straight to Blu-ray may violate some contracts and things like that, but I do think that's the biggest card that Sony has in their hand.
And that's probably the biggest reason why they haven't even tried to approach streaming, is because streaming would kill Blu-ray.
Right, exactly. But I am still really looking forward to this movie. The thing that intrigues me the most is seeing Andy Serkis's direction.
Yeah, I hope we get a new trailer for this soon.
Yeah, we should probably be getting it within the next few months or so.
In our last bit of news, DC Films has shelved Ava DuVernay's New Gods film along with James Wan's The Trench. And I'm like, thank God.
Yeah, more so about The Trench than the New Gods film, but I know that audiences kind of soured on Ava DuVernay after her Wrinkle in Time movie.
Yeah, I was a big fan of A Wrinkle in Time, the book, when I was a kid. I didn't really care for her adaptation of it. And so I really wasn't looking forward to her take on the New Gods, personally. Everyone on Twitter, apparently, though, thought that this film somehow tied into Zack Snyder's Justice League, so they were up in arms.
But it didn't, though.
No,
right?
no, it wasn't. I think there was just some confusion with us seeing the New Gods characters so recently in Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why they left those characters out of the theatrical cut, so that Ava DuVernay had the freedom to do whatever she wanted within her own film at the time. But I can see why people would be upset if they wanted to see Zack Snyder's version of Darkseid in subsequent films.
Right, and there's no saying that his version of Darkseid would have been Ava's Darkseid. In fact, I'm pretty sure they would have been very different. I was intrigued about that project when they announced that Tom King would be writing it with her, because I was a really big fan of his run on Mr. Miracle. That is a fantastic Eisner Award-winning comic book. But the New Gods themselves are kind of a hard pill to swallow. They're very unique characters. And I think the best introduction you could have had for them is through exactly what Zack Snyder did with Darkseid.
Yeah, set them up in a previous movie and then explore that later.
I've seen a ton of hate for Warner Brothers online because of this move, but again, I think it was the right call to make, especially regarding The Trench, because no one asked for that. As talented as James Wan is, and as great as Aquaman was, you didn't need to make a film based on such minor characters from the comic and the movie. They were in the movie for not even 5 minutes, I think. So why give them a feature-length film?
Yeah. Yeah, you want to make movies that people are excited to see.
You hear that, Warner Brothers? Do that. We want a new Man of Steel film. We want Ben Affleck's Batman film. We want Zack Snyder's Wonder Woman. We want a new Justice League film. We want a Justice League Dark film.
Green Lantern Corps?
Throw that on there. There's so many other things we want before The Trench. So good job nixing that project.
They finally made a good decision for once. But that is true, though. This was the right call. Do you have more faith in WB's decisions now that they've done things like release the Snyder Cut and announced the Blue Beetle movie and brought on J.J. Abrams? Is this the best time to be a DC fan?
I think I'm excited for most things coming up, except for maybe the Superman reboot. But I could be wrong. Again, I was wrong about the Joker. So we'll see. And it's always the best time to be a DC fan. What are you talking about?
I don't know about that. But I think that does it for all the news for this episode, so let's go ahead and get into our main event, where we review the 2011 animated DC film, Green Lantern Emerald Knights.
Green Lantern Emerald Knights is a 2011 direct-to-video animated quasi-successor to 2009's animated film Green Lantern First Flight. Now, Emerald Knights isn't so much a sequel to that as an in-betweequel, but you don't need to have seen First Flight to appreciate this film, because Emerald Knights does a pretty good job of going into the mythology of the Green Lantern Corps.
So Emerald Knights was in between First Flight and what?
The end of First Flight.
Oh, what?
Yeah, because by the end of First Flight, Sinestro has already become a Yellow Lantern.
Okay. So the Emerald Knights animated film takes place within the same continuity as the First Flight animated film, but also during the events of that film itself.
It seems that way because they use the same character designs, but the voice cast was different.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know what it is. All I know is that it was really good and I liked it. I watched this film for the first time this past week, and I was pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't call it an anthology, but it is anthological in that the film is a collection of framed stories within an overarching narrative, which I loved.
I thought that was really cool. I was not expecting that. I knew that the movie was going to touch upon other Green Lantern characters within the Corps outside of Hal Jordan, and I knew that we'd get to learn about like Kilowog and Mogo and things like that, but I didn't know that it was going to feel somewhat like a DC showcase film.
Yeah, and I love those.
Yes.
We've reviewed past DC Showcase films, which is a collection of short films, before on this podcast, including Superman Shazam, The Return of Black Adam, and Batman, A Death in the Family. Those are really fun. They're great. And so is this film, especially if you're a fan of the Green Lantern Corps.
Oh yeah, if you like Green Lantern as a character, this is such an enjoyable experience because it puts Green Lantern in the setting that he works the best, I think, for films, which is in space. Put the fucking character in space.
Exactly. Yeah.
And keep him there and show us freaking Green Lanterns doing a bunch of crazy shit against giant spaceships and things like that. That's what I want to see from a Green Lantern film.
Exactly. And Green Lantern, he's kind of an obscure character. I mean, I know he's had his own film and everything by now, but a lot of people I feel like don't know what the Corps is. And I was fortunate enough to watch this film with people who weren't as familiar with the Green Lantern Corps as I was, and they really liked it. You know, the Green Lantern Corps is a collection of thousands of aliens from across the universe, each with its own unique history, and it's fascinating to experience some of those stories in this film. So don't spoil it for yourself if you haven't seen the movie yet. I definitely recommend watching it. The film is pretty simple, but it has great animation, great action, and great lessons. It's definitely in the top 3 DC animated films for me, personally.
Yeah, and it's easy to watch if you have HBO Max. So if you have that, definitely check that out if you haven't already before you listen to this review, because it's a spoiler review.
Right. So longtime listeners of this show will know that I wasn't always a DC fan. I used to be a Marvel fan.
I call those the good old days.
I call those the dark ages. Before I saw the light. Now, I knew about characters like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and The Flash, but I didn't realize that they were part of a DC brand. I had never known of a character named Green Lantern until I first started reading DC Comics, and even then, it took me a while to learn about the Green Lantern Corps, because it wasn't really around in the mid-90s to early 2000s. Back when I started reading DC Comics, there was only one Green Lantern, and that was Kyle Rayner.
Yeah, because Oa had been destroyed by that point.
Exactly. It wasn't until I started reading some of the older comics, and especially during the Green Lantern Rebirth storyline, that I began getting really interested in the Green Lantern Corps and its broad cast of unique characters. To read a Green Lantern story is to literally explore the universe of DC and experience all the interesting life throughout it. And the mythology and history of Green Lantern feels so much bigger than any of the other DC characters, and I think this film, Emerald Knights, is a great introduction to that mythology. You know, you get to learn about the Guardians of the Universe, the first Green Lanterns, about Oa, about lantern training, and about some of the Corps' more prominent members, including Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern of Earth's Sector 2814. But also Sinestro, Kilowog, Lyra, Mogo, and more, all through the lens of a young new Green Lantern recruit named Arisia. I mentioned her briefly in our last episode, though I think I pronounced her name Arisia. I also called Mogo Mojo, so I've obviously been reading these names wrong the whole time.
I mean, it's alien pronunciations. It could be difficult.
Now, Arisia was voiced by Elizabeth Moss, who, by the time this film came out, had started receiving accolades for her work in Mad Men. So this was a good get, and she did a great job in the role, portraying Arisia's innocence and quote-unquote greenness, as it were. In the film, Arisia has only been a member of the Green Lantern Corps for a few days, studying under Hal Jordan during that time, when an ancient adversary of the Guardians named Krona slowly begins to reemerge from the antimatter universe through the Owen Sun, the very center of the DC universe. And as the Guardians prepared Oa for an apocalypse, the Lanterns are tasked with monitoring the sun for further signs of Krona. And during this preparation, Hal Jordan, who was voiced by Nathan Fillion, recounts several stories of other Green Lanterns to Arisia. Nathan Fillion, to me, essentially is Hal Jordan. His voice is just perfect for the character, cocky but not too serious. I wish he'd play a live-action version of the character. But I guess that's probably no longer an option now that he'll be the detachable kid in the Suicide Squad film.
Yeah.
Cool, but also feels like a missed opportunity. I don't know. In Emerald Knights, Hal's stories are parables, each with their own lesson for Arisia. The stories don't really tie into the greater plot, and the lessons don't aid Arisia in the final act in any kind of obvious way, but the stories themselves are still interesting and somewhat timeless thematically.
Absolutely. There's kind of like a big thematic lesson to be learned within each tale. And I appreciated each one for being not only interesting, but also heartfelt and also full of action. It's always great to see a Green Lantern in action. It's so unlike any other hero out there. What I specifically like most about this, though, is that while this movie portrayed Green Lanterns as very powerful beings, they weren't all powerful. They were also still vulnerable in many ways. So, like, potentially, in theory, a Green Lantern could have, like, god-level power. But that never really plays out in practice.
Yeah, they're not gods. They're still, like, flawed alien creatures that are learning the same lessons that Arisha's learning by hearing these stories. Now, Hal tells Arisha the first story as they wait in line to charge their power rings on Oa's central power battery in preparation for Krona and his army of shadow demons. The whole situation is a bit overwhelming for Arisha, and she has a moment of self-doubt, wondering why her ring chose someone like her. In response, Hal recites to her a passage from the Corps' sacred text, the Book of Oa, about confidence and courage. He tells the story of Avra, the first Green Lantern, who initially was the lowly scribe of the Guardians when they built the first power rings.
That was a cool little scene. I was not expecting that. They have some amazing character design in this movie.
They do, yeah. The aliens, it's always fascinating to see how creative they could get with these alien designs.
Yeah, something that just looks so non-humanoid. But Avra was slightly humanoid. He was kind of a cute little design, something meek that you wouldn't expect to wield awesome power
Right.
with the Green Lantern ring. But, you know, he was able to wield it unlike any of the other warriors that got the first rings.
Exactly. Yeah, after being chosen as one of the first 4 beings to bear a ring, Avra was thrust into the middle of an intergalactic war.
And the enemy aliens were dominators, right?
Yeah, that's what they looked like. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
After one of the first 4 Green Lanterns died in battle, the others hid and wanted to retreat because they didn't trust that the rings the Guardians gave them were capable of getting them through their mission alive. But despite Avra not being as war savvy as the other warriors, since this was his first battle, Avra had faith in the Guardians and trusted that they could channel their willpower from their rings to will themselves into surviving and overcoming the odds. It was such a great moment. Underdog moments like that get me choked up in films every time. It never fails.
Yeah, same here. I was like, you go, little guy. You go.
Exactly.
Believe in yourself.
Right? Right.
I wanted him to succeed. And not only did he succeed, he fucking kicked ass.
Dude.
When he first manifested the sword, the very first Green Lantern construct, and the way he just like grew it to chop an entire spaceship in half, that was
hardcore.
Classic, iconic Green Lantern moment.
For sure. And the whole moment carried a great lesson in that when we fear the unknown, courage itself is a form of faith, whether in ourselves or our tools like a Green Lantern ring, so that we can face the unknown. And yeah, the inexperienced Avra did rise to the occasion. Then he and those other lanterns straight up murdered those other spaceships like it was nothing.
Yeah, I really like how he led by example, and the other 2 lanterns started creating constructs as well. But every lantern creates constructs in their own way. It's like art. Everybody paints with their own unique style. Avra was very object-oriented. The weird, squishy jelly pillow alien, she was making these like weird drill constructs. And then you had like the ox-looking guy. He shot out this like very kind of abstract dragon-like form.
Yeah, exactly. Avras were really simple. The purple pillow was like really intricate. And the ox guys was almost like a weird kind of sketch.
Yeah.
I loved the depictions of the constructs. In the film, Hal explained how more power rings were made and how Avra helped train others in creating energy constructs. They did a brief montage showing how Avra's ring was passed down from lantern to lantern, and it looks like Hal is his direct successor, which was pretty cool, and it's a nice way of showing newcomers a glimpse of when Hal got his first ring. You almost don't need to see First Flight to appreciate this film.
Yeah, I think what this movie did a good job of showing is that every lantern has a story. Sure, Hal Jordan has his own origin story, but it's not necessarily any more or less interesting than all the other Green Lanterns out there.
Exactly, yeah. Just because he's human and the others are aliens doesn't mean he's any more special or unique than the others. As Hal finishes his first story, Arisha runs into Kilowog, the Corps' drill sergeant who manages their boot camp. Kilowog was voiced by Henry Rollins, the lead singer for Black Flag, who did a good job here, though I'd say I prefer Michael Madsen's voice in First Flight.
Yeah, Kilowog's voice here was a little bit too normal sounding, I think. It could have used some kind of like monster effect or sounded deeper or something like that.
I think Michael Madsen could totally play a live-action version of Kilowog. I mean, Michael Clark Duncan did a pretty good job with his voice in the Ryan Reynolds film, but I really liked Michael Madsen's performance previously. Now, Rija is intimidated by Kilowog's gruff look and demeanor, but as she and Hal fly off to a solar watchtower, Hal tells her a story about Kilowog. Thematically, this story was mostly about not rushing into judgment of others, as Kilowog had to learn the same lesson during his Green Lantern training as well. If you remember my profile on Kilowog in our last episode, you probably recognized that this story came almost entirely from the comic pages, though they changed Kilowog's sergeant's name from Ermay to Deegan in this movie. And Deegan was an ugly asshole.
Yeah, he looked like an angry version of one of those Mexican hairless dogs with like the massive underbite.
Yeah, that combined with like a hard-boiled egg.
Yeah, okay, that works.
Deegan insulted Kilowog and the other trainees by calling them poozers and putting them through these impossible and dangerous training exercises. They were pretty ridiculous, but that was kind of the point, because another theme of this story was about testing your limits and recognizing that you can push yourself farther than you realize.
It's about finding out who you are when you're pushed that far. As a Green Lantern, these guys go through the worst that the universe has to throw at them, and they have to be ready for that. So even though it seemed like Deegan was being a hard ass, it all served a purpose, and he basically told them that. He was like, I don't have to explain myself to you. Okay. Maybe if you grow old in this Corps, you'll understand why I'm doing this. That being said, growing old in the Corps is a privilege.
Right, because so few Lanterns get to grow old.
Yeah, mortality played a huge role within all the stories and the overarching narrative. The fact that the rings always choose their successor. When one Lantern falls, another one will rise. It's kind of poignant and sad, knowing that once you get that ring, your destiny is to die.
Yeah, your life is no longer your own. That's
Right.
explicitly what Deegan says.
You're in service to the civilians of the universe. You die so that they don't have to. It's crazy. It means so much to be a Lantern.
And a soldier in general, I think.
Yeah.
Whether in the real world or in the fictional world of DC Universe, there are people who die for you, and that's a really sobering thing to think about.
Absolutely.
Now, Kilowog proves himself to be the most capable within Deegan's trials, but eventually he gets sick of it and stands up to Deegan. When the two come to blows, it's another example of how you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, because even though Kilowog is clearly the more physically imposing Lantern and got a few good blows in, Deegan basically kicked his ass.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
He was wiry.
For sure. I think Kilowog and Deegan surprised each other in a way. When Deegan got the distress call and gave the other recruits their rings, but dropped Kilowog's before he could grab it, I was like, damn!
That was cold-blooded.
Totally. From his character design to the way he was written, you're clearly not supposed to like Deegan, which is what makes his sacrifice so interesting, because he was clearly a Lantern of honor and duty, and that's respectable.
Oh yeah, I definitely felt for him when he was about to die.
Yeah, when he scolded them earlier and told them that their lives were not their own, he lived by that too. He absolutely was not like a hypocrite. And that's what inspired Kilowog to tackle the same situation that got Deegan killed, albeit he was a little bit more creative about it in generating what I think was a massive EMP energy blast. I will totally admit sometimes it could be a little frustrating reading or watching a Green Lantern story, because it's really easy to yell at the characters and be like, no, you should have created this construct instead.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the fun, because sometimes writers come up with far more creative and impressive solutions than you could have come up with too.
Yeah, in that sense, Green Lantern stories sometimes feel a little Deus Ex Machina-y, because it's like, well, why didn't Deegan just do the EMP nuclear explosion thing that Kilowog did,
Well, he wasn't creative enough, I guess.
I guess, but it always just seems like the constructs just service the story.
You could argue that, but I think you could also, again, argue that these characters are their own beings, and sometimes they're not going to come up with the right solution. And again, that's part of why the Green Lantern's power can be so interesting.
It seems to me like the best Green Lanterns would be the ones that were best at improvisation.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a big part of it.
I was really touched by Deegan's death and the heart-to-heart that he had with Kilowog, telling him, like, I was never going to let you guys get hurt. You could tell that they both actually cared for each other.
Yeah. Deegan was clearly impressed with Kilowog. He even drew that Green Lantern symbol on Kilowog's chest.
In his own blood?
Right? His own green blood.
So moving. It's kind of like the Disney Pixar shorts. It's amazing at how much your emotions can be manipulated in such a short time span. Like, think of, like, the opening to Up or something like that.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, we barely knew Deegan.
Yeah.
And, like, towards the end, I was like, oh, God, hold on, Deegan.
Stay away from the light.
Yeah.
The act of him drawing on the Green Lantern symbol, it made Kilowog a true Green Lantern with the authority to take charge. And he's sort of been in charge ever since, adopting Deegan's gruff demeanor and, calling everyone poozers and stuff like that. It was nice to see Deegan's legacy continue in Kilowog. Now, Aresia and Hal make it to one of the Solar Watchtowers where they meet some of the other core members, including the enigmatic Lyra, who explains to Aresia that to be a Lantern is to face the unknown, though she warns that facing the familiar can be even more harrowing. Now, Lyra was voiced by Kelly Hu, who's done a lot of work for DC's animated films, most recently as Lady Shiva in Batman Soul of the Dragon, and she does great work. She's probably most famous, though, for playing Lady Deathstrike in the second X-Men movie.
Oh yeah, she's great in everything she does. I didn't really like the Lyra character, though, when we first saw her. I was like, okay, who's this chick? Just acting all mysterious and stuff. It's like, that seems unnecessary. But then through the story, you actually get to know her and see where she's coming from. And it made a lot more sense.
Her story was actually probably my most favorite.
It's either this one or Kilowog's story, I think. But they're both great.
Yeah, they're both really good. Lyra's lesson is explicitly one of preparedness and expecting the unexpected, which is fitting considering they're in a watchtower preparing for doomsday. Thematically, however, the story Hell tells of Lyra is also one of honor. Now, the story begins with Lyra's first trip back to her sector after her training as a Green Lantern. Through the course of the story, we learn that she's royalty, the princess of an empire known as the Golden Dragon, that doesn't recognize the authority of the Green Lantern Corps. That in itself sets up a really interesting conflict and harkens to the sayings about a prophet not being appreciated in their own land. When someone you grew up with turns out to almost randomly become this great and authoritative figure, you're going to be a little skeptical. But not only does Lyra run into that, but her story also has this pretty fascinating and complex conflict regarding the politics and dysfunction of her royal family. Lyra was sent to her homeworld, Jade, on a mission from the Guardians to quell the unprovoked attacks by the Golden Dragon there on another race of aliens, the Kundians. And amidst their floating corpses in space, Lyra meets her stepmother, Ryu. Lyra basically calls her stepmother a floozy, and Ryu says Lyra's dead mother was weak, and the two battle.
Those are some fighting words on both of their accounts.
I thought so too. I liked their whole dialogue about how Ryu said that Lyra had no honor for going against her family in the Golden Dragon, and Lyra was like you even know what honor is.
I'm a Green Lantern. I will cut a bitch.
Exactly.
And then she does.
She totally does.
Yeah. I really like that fight. I really like the aesthetic of the Golden Dragon people. It's almost like a very ancient Chinese look, but futuristic.
Yeah, and you get to see more of it when they actually crash land on the planet after Lyra proves to be the victor in the battle against her stepmother.
Yeah, and then she fights with her brother. That was actually a really cool fight. I really like what Lyra chooses to manifest with her constructs, in that they were all weapons, because that's her background.
Exactly. Yeah, she's trained with all the weapons of the Golden Dragon. And she's really good with them, too.
Yeah, she had this long, broad halberd axe kind of thing that she turned into a hammer to slam her brother down back to the ground when they were up in the air. It was really cool. I liked the animation on this so much.
Yeah, the fighting in this story is so epic.
It's probably among the best fight scenes I've ever seen in animation, and that includes Soul of the Dragon.
The fight between her and her brother, or her and her father?
Both, honestly, but I guess the fight between her and her father lasted longer, so yeah.
Yeah, after the fight with her brother, Lyra finds her father, Kentor, sitting in her old bedroom. With Kentor holding his daughter's doll, and based on all of the holograms of happy memories we see, it seems like Lyra and her father had a good relationship, and they deeply cared for one another. One of my favorite parts of the entire film, and one of the more tragic parts, was the juxtaposition of those happy moments in the holograms with the battle going on behind them between Lyra and her father.
Yeah, where they're trying to kill each other.
Yeah, it just showed how horrible everything had deteriorated on Jade, and how far apart the two had grown since being away from each other. And their fight actually was my favorite. That may be, I think, the best one-on-one fight scene in any DC animated film. It was so fluid and well choreographed, and the way the camera moved with them without cutting.
Yeah.
I wish something like that could be replicated in live action. I've yet to see it.
Well, characters can always pull off more impressive feats when they're animated because they're not beholden to things like gravity,
and physics.
Physics. But it was really impressive, for sure.
Ultimately, Kentor's behavior was shown to be motivated by humiliation and jealousy. He felt like he lost his honor when he was defeated by the Kundians in the past, and he felt cheated out of the Green Lantern ring that ended up going to his daughter. When Kentor ran Lyra through with his spear and stole her ring, he was shown how Lyra really was holding back this whole time, and that he wasn't any kind of a match for her.
Yeah, because she just blasted off his armor using the ring that was on his hand.
Right?
And she just wiped the floor with him.
Yeah, Kentor thought he knew his daughter, but he realized upon his defeat that she was much more than he realized. Shamed, he commits seppuku and dies in her arms, expressing his pride in how Lyra could be a greater protector of their people than he ever could.
Do you think that he would have had that change of heart if he didn't just get his ass kicked, though?
No, he wouldn't have.
No.
Absolutely not.
It's kind of a shithead.
And yet, that last moment was a really kind of touching and unexpected moment. Like when Kentor picked up his spear tip, I totally thought he was going to stab Lyra with it. But instead, he just ran it through himself.
I think he was a coward. I think he couldn't live with the fact that he just got beaten by his daughter. And even though he respected her for it, it was still out of pride.
In a way, he was kind of doing her job. She was sent there to take care of him, and he did it for her. Maybe because of how proud he was, maybe because he was a coward. It's complex, it's complicated. And I think that's part of what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
As Lyra cried, holding her father, you can see that she learned the same lesson she gave Arisia, that surprise can come from anywhere, and as a lantern, Arisia will face surprises. As we all will in life.
C'est la vie.
La vie. More and more lanterns begin arriving at the watchtowers surrounding the sun as they prepare for Armageddon. It's explained that every lantern from across the universe has been called in to help everyone except for Mogo, as he doesn't, quote-unquote, socialize. Arisia doesn't know who Mogo is, so as they leave the watchtower to take a closer patrol near the sun, Hal tells her the story of a warrior named Bolfunga the Unrelenting, who wanted to prove he was the greatest warrior in the galaxy. After defeating anyone who would fight him, Bolfunga learns of a Green Lantern named Mogo, who was undefeated. Bolfunga travels to the planet where Mogo was supposed to be, searching for months only to learn the hard way that Mogo was the planet.
That's right. There is a Green Lantern that is a living planet. The planet is a living organism unto itself, kind of like Ego from the Marvel Universe.
Exactly, yeah.
And he wields a power ring.
The story was kind of a gag, but it was good, especially if you're clued into the punchline beforehand. The story was almost beat for beat a story from the comics that was written by Alan Moore, who's the creator of Mogo. The whole thing is a lesson in humility, but also, again, like the previous stories, about being prepared for the unexpected.
This was actually my least favorite story, primarily because it went on a little bit too long, especially if you already knew that Mogo was a planet. You were just like, okay, get to it. Get to Bolfunga's discovery already.
Yeah, I could see that. It probably could have been trimmed down a bit.
Are we going to get Ego and Mogo in a fight here sometime?
Yes, I want to see that fight. As Hal finishes the story, a squadron of shadow demons attack. The Corps fights back, and Sinestro saves Arisia from a shadow demon with a giant exploding bullet. The explosion it causes knocks Lyra unconscious, and she awakens in a med bay with Sinestro watching over her.
Can I just say that the shadow demons were scary as hell? Because they were antimatter, they would immediately dissolve anything that they came into contact with.
And they themselves would dissolve. They were like kamikazes.
Well, yeah, but like when they would touch the Green Lantern constructs, they would just dissolve the constructs. So the Green Lanterns couldn't really protect themselves. And when they touched the Green Lanterns, they would just get dismembered. It was horrific.
Yeah, the opening scene when you saw that Green Lantern get dismembered except for like her hand, I was like, holy shit, that's crazy.
Yeah, seeing what a small group of antimatter demons could do really raises the stakes.
Yeah, these lanterns could legit die, which kind of ties into the whole mortality theme of the entire story. These characters are facing their deaths. Now, going back to Sinestro, he was voiced by Jason Isaacs, probably best known for his role as Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter series. Now, Mark Strong played a good Sinestro in the live-action Green Lantern film, but I've always thought that if they were to reboot the live-action franchise, which they are on HBO Max, Jason Isaacs would totally make a good Sinestro.
Well, I kind of want him to be the new Professor X, though, in the Marvel X-Men reboot.
Nah, too bad. He's mine. He has a long history of working for Warner Brothers.
He was in the Elektra film.
Oh, he was. In the Emerald Knights film, with all of the chaos going on, Sinestro remembers his friend, Hal Jordan's predecessor, Abin Sur, and his belief in the prophecies from the Book of Oa about Krona's return and Oa's destruction. Sinestro then tells Arisia about the time he saved Abin Sur from a prophetic terrorist and fugitive named Atrocitus. After Atrocitus' defeat, Sinestro reveals to Abin that Atrocitus is mentioned in the Book of Oa. Abin and Sinestro debate over whether destiny was a real thing, essentially discussing fate versus free will, the former of which Sinestro does not believe in, though Abin does.
It was an interesting discussion that kind of ended in agree to disagree.
Yeah, essentially.
It was a little bit weak. But this whole story in general was not one of my favorites, I don't think.
Yeah, same here. Now, Abin returns Atrocitus to the hellish prison planet of Ysmalt, where Atrocitus prophesied to Abin about Abin's death and Sinestro's future betrayal of the Corps. Abin, unable to accept that his friend Sinestro would ever betray the Green Lanterns, dismisses Atrocitus' warnings. When Arisia points out that Abin died the way Atrocitus foretold, Sinestro ends his story with an ominous lesson about how everyone dies just before the big final fight.
Now, why would Sinestro tell Arisia a story about his own future betrayal? That doesn't seem smart.
It doesn't.
It's like, hey guys, did you hear that one story about how I'm gonna betray all of you and kill you guys?
Yeah, it's weird.
Who would do that?
It's like, okay.
Cool story, bro. Give me your ring.
This story doesn't provide any meaningful lesson for Arisia or contribute to the larger narrative other than alluding to Sinestro's arc and teasing how the animated Green Lantern franchise could explore the Sinestro Corps War and Blackest Night storylines in future sequels that ultimately never happened.
Yeah, that last story was definitely trying to set up a Green Lantern franchise and could have been removed from the film, and I think would have actually made the film almost perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism. The film ends with a giant Krona emerging from the sun with legions upon legions of shadow demons. It was a great final fight, I think.
So many Green Lanterns died.
Despite Krona being a villain with not too much setup, except for like some exposition that the Guardians gave at the beginning, he was still a formidable and imposing figure.
Now, Krona is a Guardian, though. He didn't look like a Guardian in this movie.
No, he didn't, which was a weird change for the film to make. He does look sort of like what he looks like in this film in the comic, but I think that they should have established him as a Guardian and made him look a little bit more like that.
I forgive it because he looked badass.
Yeah, he had a cool look to him, for sure. With the Green Lanterns unable to withstand Krona's attacks, the Corps retreated to Oa with a plan from Arisia to collide the evacuated planet with Krona's antimatter form, destroying both. The entire Corps, including Mogo, manages to fend off the Shadow Demons and defeat Krona, after which they set up a new base on Mogo, and Arisia is honored with her own story written in the Book of Oa, about how a rookie like her had the ingenuity to defeat the greatest threat the Corps had ever faced in a way that Sinestro comments on actually fulfilled the prophecy of Oa's destruction, teaching him, as it were, to expect the unexpected.
And that destiny might be, in fact, real.
Which means he knew about his betrayal the whole time. It was like, I'm going to do it now.
Oh, shit! I really love how this ending scene emphasized how the Corps' greatest strength is in its diversity. Between Arisia and Mogo, the Corps is always able to succeed as a unit because everybody brings something unique to the table.
Yeah, it was a great message for a great film. Overall, though the narrative of this film was a bit unconventional, I actually liked it for that very reason.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I went in expecting to get one story, but instead I got like 6.
Yeah. And getting to explore all of the fascinating stories behind some of those core members was really cool. And I really hope this anthological approach is adopted by the upcoming live-action Green Lantern television series for HBO Max.
That would be so cool. Like, I want an anthology Green Lantern series where every episode we get to visit a new Green Lantern and see their adventures on a new planet in space.
Yeah, and maybe like all of it can lead up to like one larger overarching story like this too. It can almost be like the Foundation trilogy, if any of our listeners are familiar with that, you know? It just tells a bunch of different separate stories that all kind of like piece together towards the end.
That would be ideal. Yeah, for sure.
Not only was the animation here some of the best DC has ever produced, but the action was also exemplary, and the themes and stories were really touching. I think this film would appeal to anyone, personally, not just to Green Lantern fans, but especially them. And honestly, it's hard to imagine a more perfect Green Lantern film, so I'm giving this 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I think it's just shy of a 5-star film because some of the stories aren't as relevant as the others. But yeah, this movie has everything you would want to see as a Green Lantern fan, and it really serves to highlight what makes the character so special.
I'm actually kind of surprised we're giving it this high of a rating, considering when this film came out, critics didn't really care for it. But I'm going to chalk that up to, again, them just being sour on Green Lantern as a character in general because of the live-action film. Because this film was great.
And yeah, maybe it did catch a few people off guard with its narrative structure.
True, yeah.
But to me, that was a non-issue.
Yeah. I mean, this came out before anthologies were kind of becoming more popular with like Black Mirror and American Horror Story. So maybe if it came out today, people would like it more. But that does it for this review. Let us know what you thought about the movie by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find links to all of our accounts by visiting our website, dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you could also find links to all of our social media accounts, including our Instagram account, which you guys should check out because you can see Jonathan's no prize drawings there, and you can get updates on what episodes are upcoming and stuff like that.
In our next episode, we will be reviewing the MCU film Iron Man 2, which is a lead up to the duel episode that will follow between Rick Flag and Nick Fury.
Yeah, it's going to be Rick versus Nick, and that is going to lead up into our 225th episode, actually 226th, because we're going to review Falcon and the Winter Soldier after that, and then we're going to do Suicide Squad versus the Defenders. It's going to be a big team duel matchup, kind of like our JSA versus Fantastic Four, X-Men versus Titans, and Justice League versus Avengers episodes. So look forward to that. We have some great episodes coming down the pike for you guys.
We want to remind everyone again to please subscribe to our show if you haven't, or please leave us a rating or review on your platform of choice. Again, sharing this show on social media or in person is also a big help for us.
But that does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, Ken Johnson, Jace Crump, John Starosky, John Speas, Zachary Hepburn, and John Bechinina for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up, and away.
True believers.